Welcome to our live event. I know that we already have at least one person watching because Sandra has already said good morning from Florida, and we are glad that you're joining us. My name is Colleen Tauke, and I am your instructor during these live events. Make sure that you pop in. Let us know at least maybe a first name and where you're watching from. We love that we cover the United States, Canada, and beyond with quilters who are enthusiastic about the craft. Quilting is such a universal craft. Uh, it doesn't make a difference if you know English or not. You can watch the colors and the pieces, and you can read the numbers and understand the pattern. That's the wonder of quilting. Today, we're going to be working on blocks for a quilt called Batik Beauty. And the actual inspiration for this project didn't come from a batik, but it went there very quickly. Now, I have the quilt here on a chair because it's quite large. It's queen sized. It was a commission that someone asked me to make. And then as I was making, I'm like, these blocks are fun. I'd like to share this with all of you. So it's not quilted yet. You know, the process takes a while when you make a big quilt. But the Batik Beauty blocks are 18 by 18. So you can use up a lot of fabric really quickly, make a queen size quilt very quickly by just making 16 of these blocks. You know, sometimes when you're working on like 10 and 12-inch blocks, it takes a lot of blocks to make a quilt top. But when you're working a little oversized, it goes a little quicker, and it's fun to produce something with a lot of bright, cheery colors in it. We've got Cher says hello from Cincinnati, Ohio. Donna says good morning from Northern Illinois. We are so glad that you're joining us. Let's see. Good morning from Michigan. A different Cher popped in and said, well, hello from Michigan. That's a popular name. I think Cheryl is kind of a popular name in my generation. So some of our names are duplicated out there. Esther says, good morning from the Netherlands, are one of our international quilters who loves to pop in and join in all the fun. So what we're going to be making today, I'll show you the inspiration in just a second. But since I have this pulled over so you can see it, we're only making 3 different units. So 4 patches. A lot of us love making that real classic 4 patch block. Then we're making this side unit, which kind of looks like a flying geese unit with 2 more blocks, but it's a lot more fun to make than you think. It's really easy to put together. So these side units, and that brings in 2 colors there. And then the centerpiece, this is kind of the sticker block in here. This unit is kind of sometimes called a square and a square. It's a little bit more complicated to make because of the math involved, but I've got a great tool to present to you for making these perfect every time. Now, I'm a person who doesn't like to spend money on a tool unless it's actually worth the time. And once I saw this, I thought, well, maybe. But then I saw it demonstrated, and I tried to make these without a tool and went, give me the tool. Because mine never came out the right size. I never could get really good points on a square and a square kind of thing. And by using this tool, it's perfect every time. So because someone did the funky math and gave you kind of a template, instead of having you use your ruler, you can make this perfect every time. And that adds an extra skill to your toolbox in quilting, and it has multiple sizes. That's always a plus. If a tool only lets you make one size block, then it's kind of limited. But by the time you get done looking at that tool, you're going to see I can make, I think, 4, 5, 6 different sizes of that. So it's very versatile for you to use in the future. And you can easily sub in. All the directions are on the tool, so I'm going to show it to you in a minute. Let's see. We have Susan coming in from Kansas. Sam says good morning from Philadelphia. Marilyn says good morning from Mount Shasta, California. Wonderful. We are so glad that you're joining us. The pattern is going to be easily downloaded. There'll be a QR code that will come up, or you can follow a link that's in the comments so that you can easily get to the pattern to download that. I put in good diagrams so that it's easy to follow, and the name of the tools that I'm using, or at least options, are here. So you'll be able to see the actual names. If you jot down something and think, oh, was that right? Go back to the pattern. It will tell you the exact name of it. Now, when it comes to the fabrics for this, I told you, yeah, Batik Beauty, but the inspiration actually came from the border fabric. Sometimes you find a fabric and it just speaks. Now, because this is a commission quilt, I asked the person who commissioned me, okay, he asked for florals. He wanted something for a niece that had some bright, cheerful colors in it. And I gave him 3 options from the quilt shop in photos, and he picked this one, this really pretty fabric that has all kinds of colors in it, which was really great for me to go then and curate fabrics to go with this to create the blocks, because we've got just about the entire rainbow included in this. So by using this fabric and along the selvage, it shows you the different fabric. A lot of times we'll give you the colors that are used to print the fabric. But because these are so crystal clear, I could then go to the batik section and just pick a lot of really pretty batik fabrics that really spoke back and forth from this fabric. I could use a lime green, I could go blue green, I could go aqua, I could do the pinks, the oranges, the purples, the blues, the yellows. Don't forget yellow. Yellow sparks the eye, so yellow is a really good one to include. I could go to a true blue, and into different colors of green, because the different olivey greens, the limey greens were all included in this. So I really had an array to pick from. Now, because this is a white background, and I've got a lot of color going on over here, just a load of color, I needed that quiet space. So I picked a simple white on white as being the quiet space. Now you could pick a solid white. You could, I picked a white on white that had a little bit of texture to it. So I don't know if in the photo you can actually pick it up, but it has kind of a line to it, which is directional. But I let the lines go any direction they want within the quilt. So sometimes it's going across and sometimes it's going up and down. Don't worry about that. As a white on white, it just adds texture to your piecing and isn't distracting. We've got Sabrina saying good morning from Texas. Barbara popping in from, Victoria, Canada. Wonderful. And we've got a YouTube comment from Tammy from Minnesota. We're glad that you're joining us. Let's see. We've got Brenda coming in from Missouri. Love your tutorials. We're glad that you enjoy them. Charlene is from Oklahoma. I used to live in Oklahoma, so welcome. We have Dee watching from southern Louisiana. And let's see. Oh, that's the same Susan that got crossed over there. So we have got our fabrics pulled. We've got our white fabric. We've got our border. I also listed the binding in the instructions for the yardage. And the binding is sometimes one of those things we can debate about. You could take one of the colors and get that extra 7/8 of a yard if you'd like to accent one of the colors. You could do white as a binding. I'm not really sold on white as a binding just because I know that's the edge of the quilt that's going to take the most abuse. It may be on the ground, it might be in people's hands, and that means that it will get soiled faster. So white isn't always my go-to. You can make sure that you have enough of your border fabric, which is a lot of time very easy done, so that the color just kind of continues and doesn't have a hard stop at the outer edge. And in this case, I'm going to be using the print border fabric for my binding. But I let that up to you. You're the designer of your project, and let you choose what you would like to have for binding. That's why I always list it separately. So make sure that you read all of the yardage requirements when you're working with one of my patterns. Diana says hello from Texas. We've got a Kathleen from Spring Hill, Florida, saying good morning also. Now, one thing I wanted to really quick note is that when you buy fabric, sometimes you end up with these hard wrinkles in your fabric, especially white on whites if they've been rolled really tight. One product, and I don't have it listed there, is I hate to iron, or I hate ironing. It's made by Mary Ellen's, the products that you would find like Best Press and those. This works fabulous for removing those stubborn folds. Sometimes you buy extra wide backing, same thing, really stubborn folds in those fabrics. That product works. Again, I don't like to promote a product unless I feel that it works really well. And I always had a hard time getting those folds out of fabric and found it actually works. So it's worth the effort and the little expense to purchase that. Now, that one tool that I talked about to make that centerpiece, 4 patches, we don't need a special tool there. Will be very easy to make the side ones, but that center one, that tool I talked about, this is one by Studio 180 Designs. It's called Square Squared. The name is listed in the pattern. Like I said, this is the tool that you'll want for if you want to try that out to make that square in a square. If you don't want to buy a tool, you can simply Google, square in square, or a diamond in a square, sometimes people will call it, and get directions on how to make a unit that way. But this tool, definitely worth it. It has templates and a trim tool all on one piece, and all the numbers are on here. So if the little instructions and diagrams that come with it, you don't even need, they're all right here. I do not like having to keep instructions floating around. I like it when it's on the tool itself. Okay, I'm doing scrappy. That's why in the yardage, it says 1/3 yard approximately of each of the following. And I said 4 pinks, 4 turquoises. That's exactly what I used in mine. So I was digging out of my Batik fabrics, literally my stash of fabrics. As long as I could get a set of 4 matching, because as you look at this, especially in the center here, you need 4 matching units to go in this. So I need enough of the orange to get 4 pieces that match. In this one, I need 4 turquoise that match. Suppose you could go scrappier than that if you like. That's your choice. You're the designer. I kept so that I did 8 of a green that matched, kind of like the leaves coming off of a flower bud within that. And then 4 of these pink pieces. We'll talk about the cutting in that in the center. I used the border fabric so that there was something in the blocks that related to the border. So that's why I did that print in the center of each of the Batik Beauty blocks. Okay, let's get into the making. Now I have 2 white blocks I need here. We'll just use a couple here. Okay. When we're making 4 patches, I did all the cutting instead of doing strip piecing, because each of the blocks has different greens, different side pieces, and different centers a little here. All of the cutting is individual. I didn't do strip piecing. I actually cut blocks. And some people are going to be like, oh no, why didn't you strip piece? Because of the variation, it's just easier to cut 4 patches, or the 4 patches in individual pieces. So you're going to be cutting your greens, 2 for each 4 patch, 2 whites. If you're using a white on white, making sure that you have the right side up. That's always bright lighting helps you make sure you get that correct. 4 patches, producing 4 patches, so that for each block you have it. And when I was making these, instead of making all of the 4 patch units first, I made a 4 patches for 1 block at a time. Because my time is kind of limited, I'm going back and forth from other things and other responsibilities I have. I kind of like to focus on making 1 block, because then I feel like, I've accomplished something for the day. I made 1 block. I can put that away. Now I can go on and do the other things I need for the day. When I come back, I can put together another block, and I can check those off my list of kind of, I made a block. That was fun. Let's go on and do something else and come back. Let's see. We have Christine saying hello from Alabama. We have Brigitte coming in from France, one of our international watchers. And Peggy says good morning from Mesa, Arizona. We are glad that you're watching us. So you need to create 4 matching 4 patches. So whenever you're reading the directions and it says maybe cut sets or of 4 matching or 8 matching. Make sure you're really aware of the directions if you have to have matching sets. And a lot of times I'll tell you, keep those sets together so that it's easy to find them and locate them, and you don't have to handle your pieces a lot, because the more you handle things, the more frayed your edges will get. I'm going to put together this last little 4 patch here so that we can have 4 of them. Our goal before we're done here is to have all the units that go into one block for the day, so we have a block made. Now, if you are interested in making an entire quilt, this would be a great block to make pillows. It's an 18-inch block finished so that you have a nice large block made, and could easily be some summer pillows for the sofa or the TV room. So, okay, when you're putting these together, I actually was pairing them so that I would have them tagged together. So as I joined 2 pieces, a green and a white, I went on to the next pair so that I have them together ready as a 4 patch. I usually always tell you, press your seam allowances toward the darker fabric, kind of hides the shadow of those seams within the block. And then right sides together, finger pressing on batiks. It's kind of fun because they have a lot of ink applied to the fabric. It makes them very stable, I should say, so that you don't have to starch the fabric for those. Now there's going to be other pieces that we're going to cut that will require maybe a little bit of sizing to them because we're going to create angles. But in a 4 patch, easy peasy, because we've got some very straight seams. Now that little space where I tagged my pieces together, I'm going to just snip that thread, that little tag spot from one 2 patch to the next, so that it kind of releases, because what I want to do is pop open my seams on the back. Maybe some of you have seen me do this in the past. I like to reduce that bulk in the center of the 4 patch. So I'm going to press one seam one direction. In this case, not all of the seam allowances will be going toward the darker fabric. So I'm popping this open, and what's going to appear in the very center is this teeny tiny little, looks like a 4 patch. That means that when I lay this down to press, that my seams will be nice and flat and not bulky at the very center of my 4 patch. And then give it a quick press so that I have all 4 of the outer corners of my Batik Beauty ready to go. So we're going to set those aside. Now we're going to work on, the center block, that one with the tool. Bring my pieces in here and we'll talk through this. Now, the center piece, that center looks kind of like a square put on point like this. We'll put it this way so the flower looks like it's showing off. Isn't exactly a certain ruler mark that's easy to cut. And that is why this tool in one corner tells you what size to cut the center block. It is approximately, let's see, and they're all labeled. I want it to be a 6-inch finished block when I'm done. And that's going to be cutting it at, see, it's not quite 4 5/8. It's kind of an odd number. So that's why we use the template to cut the very center. So this is cut using the template corner of this tool. So I don't have to do icky math. Okay. So for every one of our blocks, or 16 of these, cut using this template from the corner of the tool. Then it tells me what size and how to cut these. Down the side, it says the size chart for triangles. Those are the pieces that we're going to put around it to make the very center of our, or the outer edges of that block. Now, if I'm making the 6-inch finished on this little chart, it tells me 6-inch finished. I cut them this size, and it's cut 4 1/4. So what I did And I'll put them back together because I've already cut them apart. So I didn't have to take time just to slice them. These are squares, and you'll need 2 because you need 4 triangles. And this gives you the bias edges in the right place, the straight of grain in the correct place. So we're going to cut 2 of these squares. We're going to cut them in half diagonally. So we have 4 triangles. Remember, the long leg has the bias. The bias needs to go to the inside of the block. We don't want it out on these edges here, because some people will say, why didn't you cut a square and cross cut it twice? That gives us bias in the wrong place, and it gives it not as stable of a block when we're done. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply these now to the outer edges of that first square we used to cut, using the template to cut, and apply those, and all of the straight of grain will be on the outside edge. Okay, and they're a little bit oversized, so this is how we apply them. You can measure and mark if you prefer. I simply will fold my square in half and just do a little pinch fold. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my triangles, very gently, okay? If you are afraid at all that these are going to get distorted by working with them, best press, spray starch, spray sizing, something on your fabric before you cut your squares, before you cut them into triangles. Batiks, like I said, are fairly stable because they have a lot of ink to them. So I'm going to do a pinch and find the center. That pinch lays and matches up with the pinch on the center there. And the same thing on the opposite side. You have to put opposites on first. You can't put on one and then another without opening it up. So you got to go, you can get 2 of them ready. Could put a tag, I'm going to put this up a pin on one side just to hold it so I know where it goes, making sure my little folds are my little pinch spots are matched up one over the top of the other. And I'm going to 1/4 inch seam this side, then I'm going to come over and 1/4 inch seam this side. Now, like I said, this is a little bit oversized. We're using our 1/4 inch seam allowance here, a tiny bit oversized so we can fussy cut these to be exact, and we don't have to do any math on our own. Okay, one side, then the other. Like I said, I am not a big proponent of tools unless they have versatility. They make my life more pleasant, and it makes patchwork more fun. So those 2 sides first, then come in and press outward. We're going to open this up. Make sure you get that opened all the way to the seam allowance. That's really important when you're working on patchwork, is to make sure those seams open all the way up to the seam. You won't get the right size unit unless that's opened up all the way. Beverly says hello from MS, I think is Mississippi, I believe. Hello from Pennsylvania. Joanna says hello from Brazil. Yay, we've got South America included. Tammy says hello from Pennsylvania. Okay, we've got 2 sides on. I have the seam allowances pressed toward the triangles. There are the first 2 sides. Then do the exact same thing. Fold and pinch, or kind of score that edge so you find the center. Some people like to use a ruler. That's totally fine. It will give you the same center mark. Again, the other fun thing about batiks is there's really not a right or a wrong side, because they are so drenched in color that usually both sides are both pretty. So you don't have to worry about so much right side, right side, wrong side. If you're using a printed fabric, which is an option, make sure you get right sides together so that you have them placed properly. Why do I say this? Because as I was making step outs, in a real big hurry the other day on something, and I realized I had not put them right sides together. And that is not going to help me much in the long run, is it? So always be aware, if you're using printed fabrics, right sides together unless otherwise noted. In this case, batiks, you get to pay for both sides and you get to use both sides. Okay. You're going to have triangles that stick out the end, and you're going to think, did I not line that up right? So look at all these dog ears out here. That means you did it right. Okay. They're supposed to overlap. That's okay. Right side, open this up again to the seam all the way gently. Again, never get too heavy-handed with your fabric because it can distort, but we want to gently open those seams. Give it a good press. And then we get to use the tool one more time. We are going to be cutting this, trimming it, so it fits in here perfectly. This is the fun part. Okay. On the opposite end of the tool, we use this corner for our template and our triangle measurements. The other side, as I flip it around, there is a 6-inch finished block, and then there are these little cross hatches. I know on camera it's really going to be hard to pick up. Maybe if I hold it up, you'll see there's a lot of lines on this side. But we're looking for a 6-inch finished. It's going to tell us where to line up against these intersections. So the points of that square, that inner square, so that we can get this really nicely cut. So as we lay that on there, we line up those cross hatches on the tool with those intersections of those seams. And I can cut 2 sides. Then I can cut the opposite 2 sides. So I'm wasting tiny bits of fabric. Totally fine. Rotate my block around. Do the last 2 sides so that I have an exact 6-inch finished, because it's got my seam allowances there. When the seam allowances are taken out, you always have to remember, now this is now 6.5, it will finish 6, and it will line up perfectly with anything else in this, because all of the units are 6-inch or 6.5 to finish 6. Okay, so we've got our center square done. Now we need to do our outer edges, and these are fun too. They're quick to put together. Okay, for the side unit, you'll need 2 different colors and 2 white squares. Now those are the same size white squares you used out here, so don't worry that where are the rest of them. The squares that we're going to use to make these triangles are the same size as the white that are in the 4 patch. That's why the number of cutting of the squares is kind of a big number, but that's okay. They're easy to put together. Here we go. And we need 2 different colors. You'll need 4 of each of these. You'll need to have 8 of these. This is where we're working toward. We're going to be making these units, okay? So in order to do that with a brick and a square, we can come up with this. But notice the angle of the triangle. This angles out this way. This one angles out this way. It's important because we want it to look like kind of like a star on the outer edge. Don't want all the angles to go the same way or you're making a different block. Simple as that. Jill says good morning from Memphis. And Kelly says hello from Arizona. Let's see. I don't see any questions yet, so I evidently haven't tripped and lost anybody in the process. So I have 3 of each of these made so far. And I'm going to lay them up even for myself so that I remember which angle on which color I'm working. So on these white squares, we are going to stitch these to the tops or to one end of the brick. Okay. Now, if you happen to have a machine that has a laser or a projection light on it, you can move your needle to the center position. You can shoot that projection line across and not mark any of these. But not everybody has a projection line. So in order to prepare these, let's do something dark enough you can see. You can use a 1/4-inch seam marker. You can use a straight edge. You can use whatever you want to mark these. Now, if you're using the 1/4-inch seam marker like this, what you would mark down each side, we're not using that center line. I'm using it differently. Okay. This is a little bit of a go rogue idea. I'm going to be stitching corner to corner. So I'm going to make a mark across this so that I remember, yes, I'm stitching corner to corner on this, like this. So I'm going to stitch corner to corner. Now, it doesn't matter which darker or lighter, which goes on each side of the which brick. You choose where the colors come out. But because we're doing all 4 of the pieces the same, it's going to be the same position, per se, when it goes around the block. So you kind of get that star effect. And then the other color that you've chosen, in this case, the orange, my angle is going to go the opposite direction. Now, while I was working on these, I realized I'm going to trim away a big portion, and that portion is going to waste some fabric, and I hate to waste fabric. So we have trims later that we might do something with. So I'm going to put in a second line of stitching. I'm going to use this, and I'm going to put in a second stitching line toward the edge that I'm going to be removing. And I'll show you that here. Let me mark it first, and then we will talk about making sure that you mark it to the right side, correct side. This is so that you'll leave behind a seam allowance for the units we're making and for future, maybe a project. If you don't want to keep triangles, skip this altogether. Just make one diagonal stitch across and be done. But in this case, you'll see the double stitching line. That extra stitching line is toward the corner I'm going to be removing when I'm done, because I'm going to flip this up like this to create the unit. And I'm going to be removing this underneath portion. So if you want to keep those, that second stitching line goes 1/2 inch, the width of the 1/4 inch seam marker, toward the corner you're going to be removing. Hope that didn't lose anybody. It'll become more evident as I stitch it and trim it that, oh, that's what she did. Okay. Put my needle in center position because I'm just following the line now. I don't need to worry about my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just stitch on that diagonal line, corner to corner, across the white fabric. And then when I get to the far side, I'm going to cut thread, and I'm going to do the second stitching line. That salvaging of those extra triangles, because I hate throwing away fabric, and you might find another project pop up from remains of this. It could be a project you would make from triangles you create on your own. It could be from another project you had leftovers and couldn't part with the fabrics in that project either. As quilters, we hate throwing fabric away. It just seems criminal. Okay, second stitching line, and then we can trim real quick. And if you'd like to eye that second stitching line, that one that's going to be in the trim portion, close counts. But here's how I stitched. And on this one, now I'm going to do the pressing before I trim. So let me bring in my iron real quick. I like to leave that underneath portion until my pressing is done, just so that I know that the top triangle kind of replaces the bottom triangle. They should match along that outer edge, and I'll show you that here in a second. Let me get this pressed. Nice hot iron. Good. Okay, if I leave that underneath portion until after I've pressed, when I open this up, this should line up along the outer edge. Nice, so that I know that I've stitched that properly. Same here. That underneath triangle is still there, waiting to be trimmed. Press it out and align my outer edges. And then you can use a rotary cutter. You can use a scissors, whichever is most comfortable for you, and cut right down the center. That leaves the seam allowance for both the unit you're making, and it keeps the triangles together in your leftovers. So these now join their buddies from the other piece, and now I have 4 orange and 4 turquoise half square triangles for a future project. Now, the other thing, oh, and I forgot to do this. Okay. We always press usually out and away when we're putting something like this together. And so then both of the seam allowances are pressed upward, as you can see here. And we don't have opposing seams to get a really nice join between these. So what I do is I take one of them and I press it the other direction. I call it corrective pressing. I like to have opposing seams, so I'm flipping it the other direction with the edge of my iron. If you think ahead, you can do that ahead. But at some point, if you're like, oh, I forgot to flip that the other way, you can always change it. You're the designer. Nothing's set in stone. So now, when I join these units together, right sides together, because I need to make that pointy V shape here, I will have opposing seams as I join those. And that little V in the middle will be just perfect every single time. So, corrective pressing, that's my tip for today. And I bet you probably some of you also do that already. I'm going to move my needle back to the 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the whole goal here is to make life more enjoyable in the piecing process. And if my mother were alive to tell you how much I hate using pins, she would just giggle because she hates using pins. I hated pinning in garment sewing. I hate pinning in quilting. Okay, now this seam is going that way. This seam is going down. So guess what? If I want them to all kind of go in one direction, I can press my seam allowance to one side and reduce the bulk in the very center. Let me press it quick and show you what I mean. Anything to make a quilt have less bumpy, thick intersections is a good thing. Okay. Now you can see I've got, oh wait, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to go the opposite direction. That was good. See, live video. I wanted to go all in one direction, clockwise, and I pressed it the opposite direction. Oh, corrective pressing. Here we go. Press it back flat. Now I'm going to go the other direction. That's how live video goes sometimes. Your mouth gets ahead of your hands and you do something different. Okay, now all of my seams are kind of going to that direction, kind of fanned, so that they lay flatter on the front. And you get that perfect little V because you had opposing seams. Sweet, right? Anytime you can get away with having to put in pins, it's a good thing. Okay, so you would do the same thing with the rest of these. So you have 4 matching units like this. So these are the side units. And we're going to lay our block out. And then we'll talk through the construction of joining all of this together. And mind you, I did do mine a couple of times, like, oh, that block got turned. So if you're really diligent, the idea is the 4 patches in the corner, the green should be touching the center block. Okay, so that makes kind of an angle out from each corner. Then you're going to have 4 of these matching. I don't have mine all assembled yet, but we'll lay them here so that you have those V's all the way around. And once they're assembled, it's not so hard. You won't worry about twisting them and getting in the wrong place. Just pair the first 2 up, set it beside you, and then as you assemble the next one, lay them on, and then all 4 will be matching so that you get a block that looks like this. Now, when it comes to joining this together, in the instructions, I tell you to make rows. I work horizontally. Maybe you work vertically. That's okay. If you're a vertical person, you're going to put rows together like this. Me, I do things like I read, so I do horizontal. I worked with ladies once who were beautiful quilters, set the standard in quilting and teaching, and they each saw things differently. One was a horizontal, one was a vertical. So I know that it exists. Okay. Now, by joining these together, when you join these together, you're not going to have to worry about matching seams up across here. There are no seams to match against your 4 patch. Okay. When you get to your center row, you're going to have this seam matching up with that intersection here. And let me shift this one over so we can talk about how to match that up. If you're worried about getting it centered, okay, so that this seam matches this intersection, this is the trick. Right sides together, take a pin, drop it in the crisscross of your stitching line so that it comes out right at the point of this block. So the tip of the pin is coming out right at the point. And then jump across to the piece you're going to add to it, and 1/4 inch from the cut edge, put the pin right where the two colors come together. That way they're matched up right on top of each other. It's a pin matching technique. Leave this one in, the one that joined everything, as the North Pole. Then pin on one side of that, pin the other side before you take out the North Pole. Okay, I've got pins on both sides. Now the North Pole can come out, and I will stitch through that, looking for that crisscross of seams on your center square and a square. That way you know you have it perfectly matched up. Okay. And if you are a close counts person, stitch through it. Don't worry about it. Quilters come in all sorts. Now, once you have row 1 joined, row 2 joined, row 3 joined, it's about which direction to press those seams. And I gave you, I believe, let me get to that, a diagram that tells you which direction to press your seam allowances. Because you have a lot going on here, this is going to be the boss row, okay? And in this case, I'm going to have you press your seam allowances toward the outer edge, because that center seam is so thick, it wants to be the boss and wants to fly outward. So your seam allowances here are pressed to the outer edges. That means then top row and bottom row are going to be pressed toward the center. Okay, so press this seam toward the center, this seam toward the outer edge, this seam toward the center. Once you have those 3 rows assembled, then there's a last diagram that tells you to join row 1 to 2, and then 2 to the top portion to the bottom, and it tells you to press your seam allowances toward the outer edge. So in the diagram, it will tell you which direction to press your seam allowances to get at least as flat as you can. If your fabric wants to go a different direction, let it. This just happens to be the direction that the Batik fabrics seem to want to go, so it gives you a suggestion on pressing seam allowances. Let's see. Katie says, hello from South Carolina. I don't think I mentioned Joan coming in from Nebraska, so we're glad that you're joining us for the Batik Beauty. Now, once you get 16 of these made, you can make a queen-size quilt. The only thing is that you're going to be joining blocks to blocks. And whenever you join block to block, you have to worry about all these points matching up, maybe the points from here matching against the blocks from points on another block. There's ways to avoid that. Put in some sashing. So I had you cut 1.5 inch sashing. I know it's narrow, but it makes those pieces come together, and you don't have to worry about the points from one block joining with the points on another. Let me slide this down, and I'll show you what I mean. I would have to have had these points join right up next to each other, which is a lot of bulk. It just causes a headache. So by putting sashing in here, I could let the seam allowances press toward the center, toward the sashing, and then I could get the points I wanted without so much bulk and worry about pressing. So in the last diagram, or one of the diagrams here on page 6, it'll show you to put the sashing between blocks. You're going to have a small cornerstone of fabric, of a color fabric, and then you'll have that floating block effect, so you don't have to match quite so hard on putting together those points. You've done good work to this point. I was trying to make it easy for you. Okay, and then I discuss how to put the borders on, because I actually even put an inner border of the white also, so that the blocks kind of float. So the block doesn't go up against the border fabric. It floats with a little white inner border here, and then the outer border for the quilt top. Trying to make it less stressful when you go to assemble everything. Let's see, if there are any other tips or tricks here. I think that pretty much covers all of the construction to make the Batik Beauty blocks. And yes, I did trim off all of my half square triangles while I was making the side units. So you'll have to tune in to see what this becomes. I have 3 different ideas, but I think it's going to either be a wall hanger or a table topper. And it's going to have all these wonderful batiks that I just couldn't quite part with that white. It could be something you maybe use in the same room as you use your queen size quilt, or maybe you're just making some pillows and enjoying just 1 or 2 blocks of the Batik Beauty. I am so glad that you joined me. Now, remember, if you didn't join last time, we did announce that we are going to be running the 2025 Mystery Challenge coming up. There's a fabric chat coming up mid-April. So if you see the fabric requirements come out at some point, we're going to talk about what kind of fabrics will work best for this mystery. Nope, I'm not going to tell you what we're making because that's the fun of it. But we will discuss those fabrics and some helps that can assist you along the way in picking out your fabrics for the mystery challenge. So maybe another mystery is in your future. Thanks for joining me today.